Hello, and welcome to the Millennial Nutritionist Podcast. I'm Isla Garcia, master's degree of nutrition science and registered dietitian, and I'm going to make weight loss realistic, sustainable, and uncomplicated for your busy lifestyle. On this podcast, me and my team of registered dietitians will decipher the latest nutrition research, dissect fad diets, and discuss social media trends for you so you can feel confident knowing what to eat to achieve your health goals. Research suggests that most weight loss programs aren't successful, but my experience has taught me that this is not because the participants aren't committed. It's because those diets are designed by non-nutrition professionals and center around severe restrictions. We are here to provide the facts about the science of weight loss so you can have the success you want and continue living your best life. Hey, this is an episode that I wanted to record for a while, but struggled to find the right guest, and the universe gave her to me. It's an interview with a primary care provider, Erika Henry. She reached out because she was a fan of the podcast, and I gladly scheduled her as a guest to interview. I know that our health concerns often stem from going to your annual visit, so I wanted to pick her brain about what providers look for in this visit so that you know the purpose of labs, blood pressure, and the random questions they ask. We go into how she handles the conversation of weight, and I think that she does such a great job with it, especially asking if it's okay to discuss a patient's weight and working through the different reasons why someone is at this weight. We talk a lot about how primary care providers are the point person for your health, so they can determine if your weight gain is due to depression, thyroid issues, family history, and then recommend the appropriate treatment. Oh, and we get to her opinion on the recent news of WeightWatchers' new ability to prescribe Ozempic to their clients, because we can't have an episode without talking about Ozempic these days. I hope this episode encourages you to reach out to find your own primary care provider so that you can really get to the bottom of any health and weight issues you may be having. And thank you so much for joining us today, Erika. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, I think I never asked you, where are you located?
I am located in New Jersey.
Okay.
I live in Jersey City, New Jersey, which is like right across the Hudson River from New York City.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, because you have that like tri-state accent, but I never know like where to put it. Can you recognize, like, is there a different accent for like New York, New Jersey? What else is up there?
There is, but sometimes like there's just these little minor changes. So sometimes it's difficult for me to like differentiate, but you can tell, like, I don't notice that I have an accent, but other people are like, oh, you're definitely from New Jersey. And I'm
Yeah,
like, wait, I didn't even notice that I had an accent.
that's so funny. I know, because I'm originally from like South Carolina, then moved to North Carolina, now I live in Texas. And it's so weird that I haven't heard anybody with like a Southern accent in Texas. I feel like I have a more Southern accent, but I can definitely tell the difference between like Louisiana versus like Appalachian accent. And I'm sure to everybody else, it kind of sounds the same too, but interesting. All right. So our warm up question that we kind of always like to ask is, do you have any like new foods or wellness habits that you are liking that you want to inspire others to do, or just like a new discovery that you have, or anything you've been loving recently?
So I have like one food and then I have one like exercise related one, if that's
Okay.
okay.
Give it to us.
So my food one is I've just been really into smoothies lately.
Okay.
Uh, I'm on the go in the morning. Like I start my shifts early in the morning, usually at 8 a.m. So smoothies have just been like my go-to breakfast, just like an easy way to get some greens in, some fruit. I'll add in like a scoop of protein powder, oats, chia seeds, maybe like yogurt if I need like a little bit more protein. And it's just like an easy, like go-to morning breakfast to have on the go. And it keeps me full all morning long. So I've been loving smoothies.
Great. Yeah, I always try to get clients to do smoothies. They always forget, and it's a great way to get in protein, whole grains, fruits and vegetables, everything you need.
And I've been adding in like frozen spinach as
Yeah.
well, just
Uh-huh.
to get like some extra greens. And you really can't even taste it. Sometimes it makes the smoothie like not a pretty color, but
Right.
you don't even notice that it's there. So it's just like a nice, easy way to get some extra greens into your diet as well.
Yeah. And what about your exercise thing?
I don't have a Peloton bike, but my sister does. So I'm using like her Peloton classes, and I've been loving the bar classes on Peloton lately.
Oh,
They're like
okay.
low impact, really fun, good music. Like you get a sweat, but you're not like like huffing and puffing trying to catch your breath. So I've been loving those lately. Those have been like my go-to exercise regimen lately.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people forget about them. I have a lot of clients that love their Peloton, have it since the COVID days and want to still utilize it. And they always forget that all those strength classes are on there. And they're like, I don't have anything to follow. I'm like, if you have the app, there are some strength classes on there. I've never done them, but I have clients that love them.
They have so many different classes. And there's like something for everyone. Like they even have walking classes, bar, Pilates that range from like beginner to advanced, which is nice. I have like some chronic back and neck issues, so I kind of have to keep it like pretty low key, and it's perfect. I've been loving it. So
Good. I'm trying to think if I have anything. I feel like, oh, what about I feel like I've really been into oats. I need to like figure out how to like not because I've been having like granola for breakfast and then I'll have like more like I've been putting in oats in some smoothies and then I've also been doing like I have like a whole bunch of oats from like this other recipe and I was like, I should make oatmeal cookies and I feel like I just need to diversify things. But oats are very healthy. I feel like a lot of people forget that they're like a great whole grain. You don't have to make it sugary, so that'll be my plug. Didn't you say you put in oats to smoothies, or what do you put in there?
yeah, I'll put them into my smoothies too, or I'll do like overnight oats because it's just like I actually eat them cold. You can microwave them, but I'll just do like half a cup of oats, half a cup of almond milk, add in like some cinnamon, some berries. I've been loving that too.
Well, good. Let's hop into our article. So I'm so glad to
Yeah.
have you on. I feel like we used to talk about the Kardashians all the time, and now we're talking about Ozempic all the time. So,
I
but
know
I'm
it's like
glad.
the main topic of
Yeah.
conversation now is
Yeah,
Ozempic.
exactly. I know. And after this one, I think the next couple of podcast episodes, I've dug deep to find like non Ozempic things to talk about. But this one, I really wanted to have your perspective on as a provider. So there are two articles that are basically the same thing. And I've actually been sent this a lot on Instagram, and it's how WeightWatchers has bought out or is now offering Ozempic through their subscription. So this People article that I'm looking at that we'll link is called Weight Watchers is getting into the weight loss drug business. What you need to know. There's also a CNN article that's kind of the same thing. And it looks like they've kind of bought out this, I guess, like telehealth business. I was trying to look into it a little bit. It is called Sequence, and they have dietitians on staff and providers. I don't know if they're doctors or what are they, but and then they also give you the medication. I think it's Ozempic, and they say that they also do help with counseling, but you can get the prescription through them that way. And then throughout the article, there's just kind of like different people that kind of talk about it. But what were your initial thoughts as a provider on all of this?
I think expanding access to medical care, of course, is incredibly important. Obesity is so prevalent in our country. I mean, it's incredibly important to be able to have more access to these kind of medications. I think my major concern though is I would just want people to be having like a comprehensive assessment done by
Mhm.
a medical professional before just being prescribed these kind of medicines. For me at least, it's important to look at like all aspects of a person's health, not just their BMI,
Mhm.
which they very well could be doing more comprehensive assessments. I just didn't see like a whole lot of information in the article, but I think it's just important to look at like their other underlying medical conditions, their kind of like nutritional habits, their exercise, their sleep habits, any like mental health concerns, their stress levels, just like a lot of other aspects that go into a person's health.
Mhm.
I think it's just important to take into account all those different factors because that's what's going to give you the best outcome. Like just slapping a medication on someone is one thing, but being able to look at all those other aspects, I think is really important.
Yeah, I was wondering that too, is like from your standpoint, is like what is it like to have like a doctor over the phone or provider over the phone that just kind of gives this out? I was thinking right before I was prepping for this, like what kind of provider would that even be? Would it be like somebody in family medicine? Would it be like a random person? Like, do you know what type of provider it would be?
I'm thinking it would either be with like the prescribing of this medication in particular, it would either be like a primary care physician, maybe like an endocrinologist,
Mm,
or maybe even like we have like weight loss specialists
mhm,
within our health system. They are called bariatric medicine, but they focus on weight loss. So
mhm,
maybe even those kind of providers as well.
mm,
Um, we do some telemedicine within my office, but it's mostly just for like sick visits.
mhm,
We don't really do primary care over telemedicine. I think because it's just important to be able to like physically see a person and check their vital signs and be able to, listen to their heart and listen to their lungs and like things that you don't really have access to over the computer.
mhm.
But like I said, I mean, I think it's great to be able to expand access because I know that's something that's can be really challenging, especially in like certain parts of the country where
Mhm.
there are not that many providers that are within like people that can be easily accessed. Like some people have to drive tons of miles just to
Right.
access a provider. So I think that being able to have that access is excellent. Just, making sure it's being done in a safe way.
Yeah, like kind of building on that, what would be any negatives to somebody getting prescribed this without being followed up by their primary care provider? That's what I'm thinking is like, is it weird in your world to like randomly be prescribed this medication by somebody that's not like so involved or no, that's normal and then it's just something you talk about in the visit?
I think, with any kind of medications, there's contraindications, there's side effects to these kind of medications. So I think just ensuring that people are being closely monitored would be my
Hmm.
major concern. With Ozempic, it's in a class called GLP-1s is the class of medications, which they were originally used primarily for diabetes. And now there's a couple of medications within that class that are used specifically for weight loss.
Hmm.
And like I said, I mean, there's a couple of contraindications. Like for example, there's like a black box warning on these medicines that if you have like a personal or family history of thyroid cancer, you should
Hmm.
not be on these medications, or at least be being closely monitored. And then there's also side effects. So
Hmm.
most of them are GI in nature, like GI upset, nausea, vomiting, but there can be issues with the kidneys. It can cause like inflammation of your gallbladder. So just being made sure that these things are being monitored. And if patients have questions or concerns regarding the medication, that they have someone that they can easily be in contact with to address those issues.
Okay, so it's just like again, like thinking about that bigger picture and needing somebody to kind of like know to follow up on that is what you're
Exactly.
saying.
Somebody to help guide you through that process.
If somebody is really wanting to get on this medication, what should they know from a primary care standpoint?
I mean, I think at first it's important to at least have a conversation with somebody that you trust, whether
Mhm.
you have a primary care physician that you're already seeing or you try to establish care with somebody, and just ask those questions. And also, like I was saying, just considering all the other aspects of your health as well, because
Mhm.
I think that the medication in conjunction with those other important aspects like nutrition and exercise and sleep is really going to be what gives you the best possible outcome, not only for weight loss, but just for your overall health.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think this is a great tool, this medication, especially if it is actually acting like on the insulin resistant part, because even as dietitians, like we know that we do kind of need a little bit of a push, maybe from like a medical standpoint. Like there's only so much we can do with nutrition with insulin resistance to kind of get us that initial push. But I do think we can't neglect like the other behavioral changes. And I would hate to see that you were able to lose weight without changing behaviors and then that never happens. So I'm glad to know it sounds like you're kind of saying the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, into the nitty-gritty of our interview. I feel like I have a lot of questions that I want to get through, and so we'll try not to make it super long. And if anybody's interested in any more of these, we tried to meet up before to talk about what we think would be most important. So let's kind of dive into overall what is like primary care? Why is it important? What should we talk about? I know a lot of people get nervous when they have to go to the doctor, especially if they're at a higher weight, because at least a lot of the clients that I get, they get really nervous. That's all they're going to want to talk about. And if they're not ready, what to do. So I just want you to kind of make people feel better today. So kind of starting from the top, why did you choose to go into this career and why primary care versus like other specialties?
I've been a nurse for about 10 years now. I worked as an RN, mostly in emergency medicine and in the intensive care unit, the ICU. And then I've been a family nurse practitioner now for about a year and a half. My facility that I work in is primary care and urgent care. I'm more on the primary care side of things, but I do see like walk-in and sick visits as well. So I think the thing that really got me into primary care was mostly my time being in the emergency department and seeing people in their worst possible case. People coming into the hospital, whether it be like exacerbations of their underlying medical conditions or neglecting underlying medical conditions and just seeing them in their worst possible state.
Mhm.
People having heart attacks and strokes, and not everything within our health is preventable, but a lot of these things can be safely managed in an outpatient basis to prevent them from getting to that worst possible state.
Mhm.
So I think that's what really led me into primary care was having this passion to both promote health, but also preventative care. Because that's so much what primary care is about is preventative care, early detection, So that's really what led me into primary care, is just wanting to be able to build that relationship with patients, encouraging them to really advocate for their own health, and working with them. A lot of it is, providing them with the tools and the medications that they need, but encouraging them to take control of their own health, because that's really so much of what it's about. I can provide them the tools, but we have to work together as a team in order to have the best, outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I never had so much respect or even really knew the purpose of a primary care provider until I worked in the hospital and clinical and realized like how important like I would like if I had a patient and their primary care provider was really involved in their life, I'd reach out and be like, "Hey, your person got admitted, like maybe work on these if especially if it was something like it was GI or something." And then I had like a much better appreciation for what it was and really advocate now for all of my clients to be established with one and see them every year because there's so many things that they can do that we can't do because it's a whole different field. So maybe you can explain like what exactly is a primary care provider? Like why should we go to one? Why do we need to have one? There's some people that think they never need to go. Advocate for that.
If I was to give like a definition for primary care, I feel like it's almost like the healthcare point of contact for people. So there's kind of like two different aspects. I'd say the first thing is helping with prevention and screening, but then also being like the advocate for patients and kind of overseeing their medical care. Because we do care for a lot of underlying comorbidities, and they follow with a heart specialist, a lung specialist, an endocrinologist, just depending on their underlying medical issues. And we're kind of like that go-to person that oversees everything. Because sometimes there's not always like as much communication between the specialists as there should be. So we just try to help, like I say, oversee and guide the patient, because it can be confusing to
Mhm.
navigate the medical world if you're seeing so many different specialists and just kind of having like that go-to person. So I think that's a lot of what we do, is just being like a healthcare point of contact for people. So then the other aspect I'd say is preventative care and health promotion. I find that there's this misunderstanding that if people are quote unquote healthy, they don't need to see a primary care doctor. And
Mhm.
I think it's important to still like establish care with somebody and have that relationship, because so much of it is preventing things from developing and
Mhm.
also detecting things early on.
Mhm.
Checking vital signs, checking blood work, making sure that if there is something developing that we can catch it and
Mhm.
start treating it early. Because the earlier we can start to treat these kind of long-term medical conditions, the better it's going to be for the person, and the least risk there will be of it progressing further along. So I think that's a lot of what primary care is. And then, of course, disease management, helping people manage blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol, obesity, of course, and screenings as well. So, like I said, screening blood pressure, screening blood work, and then certain screenings depending on the age of the person, like breast cancer screenings, prostate cancer screenings, colon cancer screenings, like colonoscopies and things. So, those types of like age related screenings as well.
Yeah, I always like think of primary care too, or I realized when I worked in the hospital, it's like I feel like y'all are kind of like the managers, like the health managers of a person, because I feel like you have to be so aware of like all the other specialties to be like, okay, if you're having this specific problem, then I can refer you to this specific doctor instead of like starting with this one specific specialty, like starting with an endocrinologist if you have PCOS or something like that. But then I would imagine that the primary care would also say like, okay, but maybe let's also look into your gynecologist and all these other areas instead of just kind of the one, which I think is a really big perk of having a primary care provider is it's their job to kind of think of like all the bigger picture. Is that what you're kind of saying too?
Absolutely, absolutely. And when they're seeing these specialists, getting those records sent over so we can review them just to make sure that things are not being missed. Because I find that I have a lot of patients that see a specialist, but they're not always having certain blood tests checked that I would want to check, or they're not doing
Mm,
their colon cancer screening, their mammograms,
mm.
ensuring that they're seeing their GYN. It's like all of those other little things that a specialist may not review that we make sure is being addressed at those visits.
So, this month we're talking all about the health habits you should and shouldn't be adding to your spring health regimen. And adding more produce should for sure be a health habit that you add in. I know that one difficult part about adding in produce is constantly being busy. So, I have a solution for you. It is Bada Bean, Bada Boom, crunchy broad bean snacks. They are roasted broad beans and come in flavors including sweet onion and garlic, mesquite barbecue, and zesty ranch. These are for sure the Millennial Nutritionist approved because they're only 100 calories, while containing 6 grams of protein and 4 grams of fiber because they're a bean. Plus, they're actual produce and not like a powder or some sort of manufactured fruit product. It's really just a bean that's been roasted, flavored, and put in a snack bag. My favorite thing about them is that they're a produce item that you don't have to keep cold, so they're really portable. You could put them in your car, you could put them in your pocketbook for those times when you either forget to have produce or you're out and about and you don't know where to get it. One real life example is my mom came to visit me recently and we did some sightseeing around the big city of Dallas. So I knew we would need some produce items throughout the day or it probably just wouldn't get eaten. So I packed some of these bean snacks. Both she and my mom thought that they were so good. David really liked the sriracha flavor the best, and my mom really liked the sea salt flavor, just to highlight how many really cool flavors they have. And my mom actually ordered them in that moment to be shipped to her house in North Carolina, just as a testament of how tasty they are. I actually found them, the Bada Bean Bada Boom bean snacks, on my own when I was at Aldi in that special section. So they aren't there anymore, but I bought them and was so surprised about how good the flavors were. My favorite flavor is the sweet onion and mustard. They remind me of those like honey mustard pretzels that you would get as a kid at like friends' parties and stuff, and then like just never have them regularly. I showed them on a grocery haul and Bada Bean Bada Boom reached out to me to give y'all a discount code. So you can order them online now at www.badabeansnacks.com/themillennialnutritionist and make sure to use the code themillennialnutritionist and make sure to spell it right. We'll put it in the show notes. And put in the Millennial Nutritionist code at checkout to receive 15% off. Make sure you order them online because I really can't find them in any other stores now that they're gone off of Aldi. But order them and stop letting busyness be the excuse as to why you're not eating enough produce. So let's go into kind of the purpose of the primary care visit and get into the nitty-gritty of that. So can you just start off with like, what is the purpose of this yearly primary care visit that I feel like a lot of people neglect, especially that are our age?
Like I was saying, I think a lot of it is just depending on the patient because I find that my primary care visits, like although I have a standard set of questions and things I like to review, it's also very individualized just depending on the patient. If they have underlying medical conditions, making sure that we're addressing those, ensuring that they're taking their medications, but also just, covering all of those standard things. So I guess what I'd want to do first is kind of just go over all of the different like questions and areas that I address with each of my patients. The first thing is when they first come in, especially if they're new patients to the office, which is a lot of my primary care visits that I'm seeing are either new to me or new to the practice. So it's my first time meeting them because I've been in this office for about a year and a half. So I'm starting to see my patients coming back for their physicals, but a lot of them are new to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just being able, of course, to first just have that relationship, kind of get to know these people, what their health background looks like, if they have any sort of underlying medical conditions that they're currently being treated for,
Mm-hmm.
like if they're on any sort of medications that they take on a daily basis, if they have any other like supplements, vitamins that they're taking, any prior surgeries that they've had in the past, allergies to anything, addressing like I want to call it like their social history.
Mm-hmm.
So discussing like smoking, alcohol use, any sort of like illicit drug use, what type of work they do, if they're married, if they have children. So there's a lot of different things that we go into with these physicals. They're really very in depth. The next section, as I started to kind of address earlier, was getting an idea of those other aspects of health, like their nutrition, their exercise regimen, their sleep habits,
Mm-hmm.
if they have any sort of like mental health concerns or their stress levels. And then, of course, family history is a really big one too.
I mean, there's so many things to keep track of, I feel like, on your end. Like, is there one thing you kind of go into and you're like trying to screen for, or like, do you just like have those basic questions you ask everybody? And then if there's like a red flag, you go into it, or like, what are you exactly screening for? Is the purpose to prevent disease? Or I guess like, yeah, what is that bigger purpose of you asking all those questions?
So, what I kind of do is like I go through the whole chart first with my
Mm-hmm.
patient. So, going over like those questions, like I had mentioned, like underlying medical issues, their medicines, surgeries, family history, looking at their vital signs, which could help detection of like early elevated blood pressure. Do they already have elevated blood pressure that's not being addressed?
Mm-hmm.
And the more I can get to know this person, the better I can treat them. Because then the next thing we do is after we kind of do like a full conversation of getting in depth into their medical history, I do my exam,
Mm-hmm.
listening to their heart, their lungs, like doing a complete head to toe physical exam, addressing any concerns that they may have. And then typically I like to do their blood work at the visit
Mm-hmm.
as well. I like to do labs like every 6 months to a year depending on their history, but I think that's an important aspect as well, uh, just to see if there is anything abnormal that needs to be addressed.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Again, so I feel like I hear you saying that a lot of what you're looking for is like early indication that somebody might have something wrong with them, like hypertension, maybe like indication to get screened for cancers or things like that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And
That's what,
also, if they have some sort of underlying medical condition, is it well controlled,
mm,
or do we need to make changes to get it better under control?
okay. I feel like that would relate to like my clients that might have like PCOS or hypothyroidism is what I end up seeing a lot for like conditions like that. 'Cause since I don't have an older population, I'm not really having people have like dementia and like, these other things, but that makes sense. Okay. You talked about the labs, and I kind of want to get into that because I get a lot of questions about labs and especially like supplement use for labs. So, can you explain why taking labs are so important and like which labs are important to review and why?
It really depends on the patient, but I try to have blood work at least once a year,
Mm,
just because there's a multitude of reasons why blood work is important. Of course, the first one would be detection of any sort of developing issues, making sure that current issues are being well controlled, like if they have diabetes, if they have thyroid issues, checking those levels and making sure that they're well controlled. The labs that I generally check would be a blood count, the complete blood count. So this helps to rule out anemia. It looks at the red blood cells, white blood cells, their hemoglobin, hematocrit, and their platelet levels.
mm,
So, like I said, it's the primary thing is helping us identify anemia in primary care specifically. And if there are abnormalities, there's like certain things we can address in primary care. Depending on the way the labs look, we sometimes have to send people to like a blood specialist, but it's just important to get that test checked at least once a year.
mhm,
The metabolic panel, which is like their electrolyte levels and their liver and kidney function. So
mm,
looking at like their potassium, their sodium, it looks at the liver enzymes, the BUN and creatinine. So that's helping us see like how their liver and kidneys are functioning.
mm,
Next would be the diabetes screening, which is the A1C. In the metabolic panel, we do get just like a fasting glucose level, but then the A1C is a 3 month sugar average. So it looks at the previous 3 months and it gives us a number, that it's a percentage. So anything less than 5.7 is considered normal. Between 5.7 and 6.4 is considered pre-diabetes, and then 6.5 and higher is considered diabetes. So that number helps us a lot, both with monitoring for people that currently have diabetes and seeing how well controlled it is, but also if we detect, someone that's in the pre-diabetic range or like right on the border of diabetes, that's something that we want to address earlier on.
mhm.
Discuss nutrition, discuss exercise, and make sure we're checking that on a more regular basis so that that person doesn't move into the diabetic category.
Gotcha. So that could be one of those like examples you're talking about how it's like that might not have like a whole lot of problems in life right now. Like you might not have a whole lot of symptoms, but going to a primary care provider to get lab work can be one of those like preventative measures. Is that kind of like what you're saying?
Absolutely. Because a lot of people, I mean, if a lot of people don't have symptoms
Hmm.
from diabetes, at least early on, if they have
Hmm.
really poorly controlled diabetes, they may start to develop symptoms. But someone could be, early on in the disease process and not feel anything.
Hmm.
So, and the problem is, as it continues to progress, it's much more difficult to get it under control. So the earlier we can identify it, the better. And if people are like right on the border of prediabetes, we can start medications. We can address their diet. We can, send them to a registered dietitian to discuss different foods to help get it under control. So that's one of the big ones. That's really important for us to be checking routinely on patients. Next one would be the cholesterol panel, which is
Okay.
another good one.
Mhm.
So the cholesterol panel includes the total cholesterol, which is it takes like the LDL cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol, and the HDL cholesterol, which is the good cholesterol, both into consideration. Uh, that gives us the total cholesterol, and then also the triglyceride level. So that's another big one, unfortunately, that we see in primary care. There's a lot of people with both hyperlipidemia, which is elevated cholesterol, and then high triglycerides as well. So that's one of the big ones that we often check.
Can you
Uh,
explain? Because I get this question a lot and I get confused with cholesterol stuff, which I feel like a bad dietitian for doing. But, I get clients have high cholesterol because I feel like that is something that, like, we are kinda struggling with, people are our age now. And they often talk about, like, the ratio. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you feel comfortable, like, explaining, like, why is it okay if, like, your LDL is high, but the ratio is okay, or is that not a thing?
so it's like it's almost like looking at the whole picture, because
Mhm,
if a person has like a borderline elevated LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, but their HDL is excellent, like
mhm,
normal HDL is between 40 and 60 is ideal. The
mhm,
higher the better with HDL. So if someone say their LDL is borderline high, but their HDL is like in the 70s or the 80s,
mhm.
we don't worry quite as much because it's almost like a negative risk factor, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, I'm thinking about it kinda like profit versus revenue or whatever. It's like if you spend a lot of money, but you also make a lot of money, it's okay, so it's like that's fine is what I'm
Exactly. And there's
okay.
also there's also a risk score that we calculate a lot of the times. It's called a 10-year ASCVD risk score. It's like atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Essentially, what it is it's a risk score that we use. It's like a calculator that we plug in their age, their race, their blood pressure, their cholesterol, whether or not they have diabetes, if they're a smoker, and it helps us identify like the 10-year risk of them having some sort of like cardiovascular event, whether it's
Oh.
a heart attack or a stroke.
Oh, wow,
We
okay.
take those numbers, we plug it into this calculator. I have one on my phone. It's like an app that I use on my phone. And depending on the level, like if it's greater than, I believe it's 7.5, I think it's right around that range. If it's greater than 7.5, it's like strongly indicated to start a medication
Oh.
for cholesterol, specifically a statin. Statin-based medications are usually like our go-tos, our first medication. If it's less than 7.5, we can typically start addressing the cholesterol with more like lifestyle
Mhm,
modifications, like diet and exercise and things of that nature. So it's really like I said, it's dependent on the patient. A lot of this is just kind of looking at like the whole picture. A couple more things. Next would be thyroid screening.
mm.
So typically we start with, I know you did an episode on thyroid screening that I listened to, which was great.
Uh-huh.
Uh, typically we start with just like the TSH, which is the thyroid stimulating hormone. If people have underlying thyroid issues, like they're on medicines for their thyroid, we may check some other tests as well. But
Mm,
typically we just do like the screening for the thyroid. And then if that comes back abnormal, then we can go back on and add on additional testing if needed for the thyroid. And then a couple other additional things, like depending on the patient, I'll do like a vitamin D, depending on their age. If it's like a male in his late 40s, 50s, I'll do a PSA, which is like the prostate screening. If there's concern for anemia, like say the woman has like heavy menstrual periods or fatigue or like feeling other types of symptoms like lightheaded, dizzy, I may add on an iron panel and a
mm,
ferritin, which is to help us identify if there's like some iron deficiency anemia going on.
mhm,
And then depending on their nutrition, why it's really also important that I ask about their dietary intake. Like if they're vegan, if they're vegetarian, I may want to add on like a vitamin B12, a folate, because
mm.
those can be low if you're not taking in meat. And vitamin B12, folate, iron, and vitamin D. Yep, those were all the other ones that I may or may not address, like just depending on their nutritional intake.
Okay. I need the inside scoop on vitamin D. Is it like do how many people come back with a low vitamin D? Is it like everybody or like is it only like 25%?
I feel like especially where I live, like I'm in the northeast part of the
Mhm,
country, I feel like so many people have low vitamin D. We just like don't get enough sun.
mhm,
Um it's so common, especially in this part of the country. I find that I have
Yeah.
so many people taking vitamin D supplements.
Mhm.
So I think it just depends on, I mean, I'm going to be honest, I don't really know for like a percentage wise. I think it
Mhm.
depends on where you live, how much sun you're taking in. I don't really know to tell you 100% like what the percentage is, but yeah, it's very common in this part of the country.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha. No, I was just wondering because it seems like vitamin D is like another hot one, like for right now. And I do get a
Absolutely.
lot of clients and audience members that ask about vitamin D and what do they need to do. And that's like one weird one that it's like kind of nutrition related, but it's like also kind of not. So it's not like really within my realm to talk about.
I try to get at least like one screening on vitamin D, um, because some people are like very deficient in vitamin D, and we have to treat them with
Mm,
like high doses of vitamin D. And then just have people like switch over to like a vitamin D supplement every day. But it really, yeah, it really depends on the person.
I think that kind of, oh, with the lab work, I did want to make sure to ask. So, because I have a lot of people who are on supplements, and I feel like nobody ever wants to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it either. But with the lab work, like, when would you ever like recommend a supplement? Because my recommendation always just comes back to whatever your primary care provider says. Let's do
Yeah.
that. So, what would like indicate somebody to like clinically be needing to be on a supplement of some sort?
Supplements are so tough. I
Yeah,
have people ask me about supplements all the time.
yeah.
They're taking all these kind of, fancy things that they found at the Whole Foods store. They're on fish oil, they're on
Mhm.
turmeric, there's so many different supplements out there. And it's challenging, from a medical standpoint, just because there isn't a ton of like there just isn't that much data out there to support whether or not they're beneficial. Like if I check blood work, for example, and people are found to be vitamin D deficient or vitamin
Mhm.
B12 deficient, there's signs of iron deficiency anemia. That is when I recommend those supplements. Like when there's a clinical indication that there's some deficiency. Because otherwise, like I said, there isn't that much data to support that they're really beneficial. So it's one of those challenging things. I have some people that take certain supplements and they swear by them. They feel so much better when I take them. And I'm like, as long as there's not any, interactions with your medications, I'm all for it. But I generally don't recommend them unless there's like a nutritional deficiency that needs to be addressed.
Gotcha. Okay. So repeating that, you would only recommend from your like opinion and what you know about supplements when there's like a clinical indication, like a low level on blood work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
That's what I would
Okay.
say. That's what I would say. I mean, I think it is important to still have that conversation with the provider that you're seeing and like going over the supplements and things that you're taking, because that is the one thing is there can be interactions
Hmm.
between medications and supplements. So I
Yes.
always ask patients what they're taking because like there's certain medications like that can cause like if people are on blood thinners, they can interact with blood thinners. So I just always make sure to have that conversation. And as long as there isn't interactions with their medications, I don't think there's a danger in taking them. I just don't know how much benefit they would provide to tell you the truth. There just isn't enough data to support it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're having a lot. I think at this point we've had on, yeah, GI doctor. And then the episode hasn't gone out right now when we're recording this, but orthopedic PA. And I feel like all of y'all are really saying the same thing where it's like, let's just stick to the science. But if it makes you feel better, we're not going to really discourage it unless there's some sort of contraindication.
Exactly. And I usually just tell people like go back to like the foundations of health. Like
Hmm.
rather than doing all these fancy schmancy supplements and things, like go back to your whole foods, your vegetables, your fruits, your whole grains, your exercise, your sunlight, just like go back to the basics. Like instead of adding in, because I have a lot of patients that, they want to add in all these supplements and these different things, which is good. But if you're not going back to just like the foundational aspects of health, I just don't know how much benefit they'll provide. So that's why I just kind of like to go back to the basics, like I said.
Love it. Let's narrow in on if somebody is overweight or obese, how would this change the visit? Because I think this is probably the majority of the audience that we have. And when I get clients, they do get kind of nervous that they'll get a judgmental provider. It keeps them from going for years, stuff like that. So can you kind of walk through like, would that visit be any different or would you not treat that any differently?
I think the first thing I would say is I always want to ask to make sure that that's something that the patient wants to discuss.
Mm,
'Cause weight can be a challenging topic for some people, and it can be triggering. So
Mhm.
I make sure that I ask for permission to discuss the weight with the patient if that is a concern. And then, I try to just have a very open, honest conversation with them. I discuss, like I said, their nutrition, their exercise, how their weight has been like over the years. Like, have they noticed like a fluctuation in their weight? Has there been
Mm.
recent weight gain? Because sometimes these things can come down to a medical issue. Like, is there
Mhm.
a thyroid issue going on that's causing weight gain? So just making sure that I'm identifying, getting more information in regards to their weight. I never want my patients to feel guilty, to feel shameful, and just providing them with good resources. Like we were talking about a little bit in the beginning, like there certainly are medications out there. There are specialists that this is their specialty is weight loss medicine. So trying to identify if that's something that the patient is interested in, if they would like to see a registered dietitian to discuss nutrition, checking the labs to make sure there isn't something medical that's causing weight gain. It's not that the visit is different. I just try to make sure that all of those aspects are being addressed.
Yeah, I feel like I hear you saying it's not I mean, it is about the weight, but it's really about, like, what caused the weight gain, and is there, like, a medical underlying condition is kinda what I hear you saying. It's not just, like, you need to lose weight. It's more like digging into, like, what is the reason, and then, like, is that, like, something we need to fix? Whether it's, yeah, a thyroid issue, whether it's, I don't know, underlying, like, mental health issues or something like that is what I
Absolutely.
kinda hear you saying. Is that right?
I think it's really important to be able to address those things first
Mm,
because, there can be a lot of things that can lead to weight gain. So I think just making sure that we have that conversation and I'm really getting to know this person before just like I said, like throwing them on some medication. Like I think it's really important to just understand all aspects of their health. I want people to feel comfortable talking to me about these types of things because there is a lot that we can do. There are a lot of resources that we can provide to people.
mhm,
Um, but also just encouraging them to find a plan that works for them because this has to be a lifelong commitment. I don't encourage like restrictive eating. I don't encourage like restrictive diets and things because I just find that it may allow for like weight loss early on, but it's just not like a sustainable solution for people. So
mhm.
just trying to find something that's going to work long term for people.
Do you think, or I don't even know, is it like best practice within your field to always address weight? Because I think this is a concern some people have, or is there like a reason that it wouldn't be addressed in a session?
So when I have people coming in for their primary care visits specifically, I always make sure to at least ask if that's something they would like to discuss.
Mm,
If they're coming, and that's the thing that's difficult is like some people come in for like other unrelated issues, like walk-ins and things and sick visits, and I don't always address it at those visits.
mhm,
But when they're coming in for like their primary care related visits, it's always
mhm.
something that I do try to address with them.
Gotcha. And why is that? Just so we can be really specific. Like, what is the benefit of that?
Just long term, unfortunately, like overweight and obesity can just lead to a lot of like other underlying chronic medical issues. It's
Mhm,
a risk factor for a lot of underlying issues like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes. Um, it can cause a lot of joint pain over time. Sleep apnea, which is something where like people have these episodes of apnea during the night where they can't breathe. So there's just a lot of other issues that can develop where overweight and obesity can be a major risk factor.
gotcha, gotcha.
So that's why I always try to address it, but in a way that's respectful, um, in a way in which the patient feels comfortable to talk to me about it. And I think that's just the way that I like to practice. I want people to feel comfortable coming to me and talking to me about these things. It can be a challenging topic for a lot of people. So
Yeah, I think that's great, and it sounds like you're not being, like, making it, like, the root cause, and, like, on the flip side, I do that with the same with clients that I see that may have, like, depression that aren't treating it, like, I just likely let them know in the beginning, "Hey, like, are you doing anything about it? It may impact, like, your weight journey as well, but I'm not gonna stress it unless you really want some help with, like, trying to find some resources or something like that. Because I feel like we're both saying that it is needs to be kind of like patient led and what their goals are, and then you're there to kind of guide them along the way of what their goal is.
right? Because we have a lot of resources and things that we can do, but I want to make sure that they're on the same page, that we're on the same page together because we have to work together as a team.
Right,
And
right.
that's because, I'm sure you see it with a lot of your clients too. Like there's unfortunately like a lot of non-compliance and things when
Mhm.
it comes to health. Um,
Mhm.
so making sure that they want to better themselves too, because that's what's going to lead to the best outcomes for people.
Yes. Where can we find a primary care provider? I mean, you sound amazing. I'm sure you can't service the whole US. So, for all
I
those of us
wish that I could. I wish I had the time to do that.
for those of us not in New Jersey, like how can we kind of find a primary care provider and how can we find one that we like?
I think there's lots of ways to go about finding one. The first thing I'd say is just kind of ask around to people, see if you have friends, family that have somebody that they recommend that they trust. Cause I think that that's a great place to start is just being able to speak to somebody that that has
Mhm.
someone that they've had a good relationship with.
Mm.
I think the next step would be probably calling the insurance company that you have your insurance through and finding out who's within network.
Mm.
Because as much as it's very important to establish care with somebody, I also don't want it to be a financial burden for people
Mhm.
either. So I think finding somebody that's within your network and then just doing a little bit of research. A lot of primary care providers and most providers for that matter have like some bio online
Mhm.
where they talk about the types of things that they treat, their approach to care. So just finding somebody that you feel connected to that practices in a way that you feel like could meet your own individual needs.
A question that I had on that just popped up in my head is there like a big difference? Do you feel like a general difference between primary care providers that are associated with a hospital versus like completely doing private practice? Or do you feel like it's still like there's not like a theme between those?
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. I work in a primary care practice that's affiliated with a hospital, but we're like our own separate entity. Like we function
Mm,
outside of the hospital. I think the benefit, I mean, I'm sure there could be benefits from both. I can only speak to working in a hospital because that's where I work. Is we have a lot of resources in terms of like referrals and things. Like if
mm,
I have a patient, for example, that I want to get in urgently with a specialist, like a cardiologist, a pulmonologist, a GI doctor, a rheumatologist, whatever the case may be, is we have like a whole system of providers that work within our hospital team that I can easily get patients in with because we're all like within the same network.
mhm,
So that I think is a big benefit just because we have like that connection. But I'm sure that being in a private practice, they probably have some level of access to that as well. That's just from my experience. I've found that that's been really beneficial, especially as like a fairly new, provider. And I'm always asking questions, always trying to speak to specialists to find the best ways to treat my patients. That's just been like a nice resource is having that access to, you know, the best of the best.
yeah, which again kind of goes back to the whole point of having a primary care provider is to like have that resource of all the people to kind of be able to point to and say, okay, go here next.
Because in primary care, I mean, we can't send people to specialists for every single little thing.
Mhm,
We have to do our very best to manage as much as we can in primary care for a number of reasons. I mean, it's difficult for people to get in with specialists. It can be
mhm,
expensive. It can be difficult for time wise. So I really try to do the best that I can to manage as much as I can. So just like building those relationships with people is really important. So I can try to manage as much as I can for my patients so they don't have to go bouncing around from doctor to doctor to doctor to address every single like medical issue that they may have.
okay. Well, wrapping up everything, can you let us know 1 to 2 like actionable steps people should take from this? Like if there's like 1 2 things people should like do after hearing all this information or take away, what do you think that would be?
I think the biggest one would be if you don't already have a primary care, I would make it a primary care. I'm sorry, I would make it a priority to find one
Mm,
because I really do think it's a super important aspect of your health. And even if you feel like you're a very healthy person, I think just having that established relationship with somebody, being able to have that preventative care, those screenings is so, so important, not only for our health now, but just our health long term. So
mhm,
that would be the first step I'd take is just making it a point, even if it's before the end of the year. trying to find a primary care physician, do a little bit of research, find somebody that you feel you could connect with, and make that appointment and just kind of see how it goes. I mean, it can be, if you haven't been to a doctor in a long time. I have people that come and see me and they're like, I haven't been to a doctor since I went to my pediatrician. I'm like, okay, we have a conversation, and we just take it from there. So that would be the biggest actionable step, I'd say, is just, if you don't have one, go ahead and see one, because it can be a great way to address your questions, to have that resource to go to, because there's so much mixed information out there. It's difficult to find reliable resources for your health. So just having that go-to person that you can trust, that you can ask questions to, is a really great thing.
Yeah, and I feel like something that people hate on in the US health system all the time is we're not preventative, we're not preventative, and what I'm hearing out of this is that the whole point of the primary care provider is to do that prevention, so don't complain about that if you don't go, is what I'm hearing.
Exactly, exactly. We don't want people to go to the hospital if they don't have to
Yeah.
go. We want to keep people out of the hospital. So go to your primary care visits, get your blood pressure checked. All these things to just prevent those hospital stays is so vastly important.
Okay, well, let's say somebody's listening to the episode and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I really wanna work with her. I live in New Jersey." Like, how can they reach out to you or even, like, become one of your patients?
I unfortunately at this time I don't have like a professional social media page. I know that's, something I maybe should consider doing in the future. So it's difficult to find me on social media because of that. But I can provide you, Isla, with my personal email if people want to reach out.
Mhm.
I am a nurse practitioner through Valley Medical Group,
Mm.
so they can find my bio online. That's where you can search me.
How'd they go about becoming your patient if they wanted to? Would they just, like, schedule, like, what would it be, like, an annual visit through the Valley Mental Health System and try to
Yep.
find your name?
Yeah, if they
Okay.
just search my name on there,
Mhm.
you can find me right through the site, and you can schedule an appointment.
Great, great. Because even those nitty-gritties really keep people from signing up, so I just wanted to detail it as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, if I can provide you with my personal email, if people have
Mhm.
further questions or anything they just want to chat about, you can always reach me there. So yeah, this was great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like this is a great episode that we'll be able to use from years to come, especially with clients who might be nervous or people listening that are never clients or just audience members that hopefully are inspired to go to their primary care provider is really the whole point of this whole interview. So thank you so much for joining me today, Erica.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for listening to the Millennial Nutritionist Podcast. For daily weight loss tips and nutrition information, you can find us on Instagram at the.millennial.nutritionist and on TikTok at millennial.nutritionist. If you find this information helpful, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend who needs encouragement on their health journey. See you in the next episode.